All right, so let me refresh this. This is a rough day. Got makeup sliding and stuff. This is a rough day. It's after the work day, guys. Usually the makeup is gone, gone, gone by today. By this time. All right, I gotta clean my work area. It's like really dusty. All right, you guys. Hello. And welcome, welcome, welcome to those of you who are just tuning in. If you missed this, you are welcome to catch it on the replay. I'm going to get right into this because I don't want to stay on too long because I am actually putting together furniture for my kids' room. So fun, so fun. But this is easy stuff, so you know, it is what it is. All right, so I've never read John Milton's Paradise Lost, and I've heard about it, didn't really know much about it. And then I just decided to get curious, and I just wanted to go on this adventure with Paradise Lost. And I didn't read the book, but I found this awesome recap of the book on YouTube. And I do encourage you guys, if you're interested, to check it out. Let me pull them up here for a second here. They're called Mythology and Fiction Exploration channel. Or I'm sorry, Mythology and Fiction Explained. And this is a channel on YouTube. Now, first of all, I like to just put in the disclaimer there. I think that people who are believers have to be very, 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 very careful about some of the things that they indulge in. And even if you're indulging in these things for entertainment purpose, you have to be able to understand what the messaging behind whatever you read or take in, what is it really trying to convey to you? And just like I was telling people that right now I'm exploring the Apocrypha. I'm not saying that these are legitimate books of the Bible. Many people think that these are mystical books, but for me, I want to examine for myself, what is the overall theme of these books that have been omitted from the Bible? And do they contradict or usurp God's ultimate plan, mission? Does it favor the adversary? I kind of look for things like that. Like what kinds of, how is this information swaying me? So as a Christian, I do believe that we need to be careful. Bad association spoils useful habits, and bad association could be a book, a movie, anything that can plant seeds in your mind of doubt about your faith, and overall belief systems. And I'm okay for belief systems to be challenged. They just have to come from an organic place in my world. So with Paradise Lost, I didn't look at this as I'm going to get some profound religious insights or anything like that. I just kind of wanted to know, where is this author coming from? People, this is a profound work of um, literary work. And so I'm just like, I just want to see kind of where this guy is coming from, where the author's intent, where is it going. So I had to do a little research about John Milton. And obviously he came from a pretty decent family, English guy, went to some pretty decent schools, went on to teach, really into science and religion, and he got into politics a little bit. And so this guy was pretty well rounded. I even searched if he was a Freemason because I'm like, Masons are always full of riddles and secrets and messaging. But according to, even though he might have been an intellectual, he could have had lots of, conversations with Freemasons, right? According to some of the things that I've seen so far, he wasn't a Freemason. So that was a relief, right? Because if he had any attachment to Freemasons, I would have automatically think, and not even just Freemasons. I'm not talking about the ones who didn't get infiltrated. I'm talking about those Illuminati kind of people, right? Those folks, right? They're always infiltrating some stuff, skewing it for the devil's work. So he was not one of them. Thank goodness, right? So this guy is exploring Paradise Lost. And if you've never read the book and you're curious about reading the book, right? This is going to be a great overview because you're not going to hear me talking a whole lot because we're going to be kind of breaking down some things. Now, the first thing that, I think everybody should always be mindful of is Second Corinthians, if you're a believer, Second Corinthians 11:14, right? Because it talks about how Satan masquerades. You have all these apostates. In the verse 13 tells us about the people, the false prophets who are on this earth masquerading as angels of light and all that good jazz. But you know, we are admonished that we should not be shocked about these things because even the devil himself masquerades as an angel of light. Now, I don't know if anybody else has noticed this, but I find that we live in this age where vile people are being like humanized, if you will. So they'll do like really animalistic, wicked things, and yet somehow they are humanizing these people who do vile, wicked things, and sort of trying to garner public sympathy for just wicked people. But that's how Satan works, though, right? And so, as I'm looking at Paradise Lost, this is, if you're a religious person, this is, basically Satan's story, right? And Satan is always going to tell his story. Like, and this is the thing that people don't realize too, is Satan mocks God because he fell for the mindset of the glory that he felt like he should have that was equivalent to God, right? And this is for my believers, right? So Satan is always mocking God in some kind of way. And it's not even just mockery, he's a copycat. He's an ideal leech, right? So if God is going to create a church, Satan's going to create a church, right? If God is going to have, his son come down in earthly form and be a savior, an example, a teacher to mankind, Satan has to have his son in fleshly form in some kind of way doing that as well, right? So there are so many different parallels between what we read in the Bible and kind of what we see playing out on this earth as a sheer mockery to the Bible. But off that, let's talk about Satan's story. All right. Let's talk about Satan's story for a little bit because, again, when you read these poems and these stories, right, they're trying to sort of humanize Satan, right? They're trying to give us some level of sympathy for Satan or Lucifer, right? And you can tell how busy the devil is, right? Because didn't we just have a show called Lucifer, right? Wasn't there just a show called Lucifer? I've never seen that show, Lucifer, right? But the whole mission of that show is to humanize the concept of the devil. And it's so funny because people say the devil doesn't exist, God doesn't exist. Then why is it that there's so many personifications of this evil entity in so many different ways throughout human histories? And why is it that, we take it a step further as human beings to actually try to humanize this perceived evil entity, right? And we've done this for ages, in various art forms, right? So human beings, even though many don't believe in the devil, they don't believe in the angels, that's fine. People believe what they want to. It doesn't negate the fact that throughout human history, they have been romanticized. Humans have been fixated on these idealisms, and it's not just even about this story or story or story. I mean, these people, some of them are forming their own belief system, their own gods, their own deities around these ancient ideas, right? That have been practiced for ages. So there's nothing new under the sun, especially Satan's son. All right, let me get to the chat really quick because I didn't see people came in. What's going on, everybody? Peace to you. Peace to you, John 3:16. Satan is defeated. I don't think so. Too many demons on this earth. Demon spirited people on this earth. He tried to get worship, and now how did that go? Right, he right here down here with the humans, miserable. But let's go into Paradise Life, you guys, because if you didn't read it, this will be fun. And shout out to Mythology and Fiction Explained. He's going to give us a devil story.
The biblical story of Adam and Eve as they fall from grace and are expelled from the Garden of Eden, and the story of Satan, or Lucifer, who along with the other fallen angels must create their own home after being expelled from heaven. Just for some overall context, John Milton was an English poet born in 1608. He was a huge advocate for freedom of speech and freedom of the press, which are aspects that certainly bleed into his work. Milton was not a big fan of the monarchy, and many believe this is why his portrayal of Satan is much more sympathetic. It aims to tell you his story, as opposed to just telling you he is evil.
Okay, now mind you, this guy is definitely creeping into that enlightenment period, right? And when you think about enlightenment and when you think about just satanic presence, satanic ritual, satanic symbolism, there's going to be some reoccurring themes there. You're going to see torches. You're going to see things alluding to light bearers and light, rebirth, things like that. These things are very much associated with Satan's worship. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. Sun worship, right? A lot of people are worshiping Satan and they don't even know it. You know, a lot of people are like, Sabbath is on Sunday, Sabbath is on Sunday. It's like, really, it's not. Sunday is really Satan's day, right? Real Hebrews will observe Sabbath Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, right? People who really understand the Sabbath, right? And the Sabbath times. But again, Satan has manipulated days, months, seasons, and year. So, you know, people are celebrating Christ's birthday on really a sun god's or Satan's deity birth, right? And I think a lot of people don't realize that. But, you know, again, Babylon the Great is the harlot, the world empire of false religion, and many people have become estrayed by her, unfortunately. But when I think about people who write about the devil's perspective, you know, right? And I think it's an interesting, you know, topic to write about, right? But I often wonder, you know, again, God had his inspired prophets, and then he had people like Nostradamus, then Satan, right? He's going to have his inspired prophets too. This is where we get Nostradamus, right? Nostradamus was a Satanist, an alchemist. There was nothing foreshadowing about, foretelling about him. It was really what the demons and Satan was probably telling him that they were going to do or whatever. But Nostradamus is what I would consider one of Satan's prophets. But again, Satan is in it to mock God. So he needs to tell his side of the story, right? And this is the same with the Anunnaki,
Paradise
right?
Lost was
Those are
first
the
published in
demons' perspective of
1667
what
and
happened.
consisted of
When you're
10
talking about the Greeks, you know, and they're talking about the Titans, right? The Greek gods, right? Greek mythology, right? These are really Satan and the fallen angels. This is their Bible. This is their accounts. This is their way of tricking mankind into believing that the words in the Bible are fiction, that they're not true, even though it has, you know, it's hard to refute that the Bible is one of the most accurate books, if not the most accurate book in mankind's history, right? It documents mankind's history very accurately, right? So even if you're not a believer, at least you should be a believer in history, right? You don't have to be a believer in religion, but the history is there and it cannot be refuted. All right, so let's hear Satan's story.
10 books. In 1674, it was redrafted to contain 12 books. John Milton is considered amongst the greatest English poets to have ever lived, and Paradise Lost was seen as his magnus opus, the greatest of all his work. Now, I know stories and poetry from hundreds of years ago can be difficult to read at times, so hopefully today's not-so-brief summary of John Milton's Paradise Lost is somewhat comprehensible, or at the very least entertaining.
Okay, so this guy does a great job of breaking this book down. So that was his intro. I want to get past the ads because I don't advertise on my channel. So, all right, here we go.
I have a confession.
Oh, I don't want your confession, dude. Let me
regret not trying therapy.
You regret not trying therapy? Some people need it. Some people need it, especially if you ain't got God. You better take your ass to therapy and talk to somebody.
Brief discussion of humankind and its disobedience towards God. This refers to Adam and Eve eating the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge. Milton's speaker places some of the blame on the infernal serpent, the fallen angel that he refers to as Satan and some of us may know as Lucifer. This angel stirred hatred, envy, and revenge. He placed himself above his peers, believing his glory to be equal to God. This turned into a war in heaven, which resulted in God hurling Satan and his followers from heaven into a fiery pit below. The fallen angels wake up in a lake of fire in Tartarus, or what we know as hell, where they are bound by adamantine chains. When Satan wakes, he describes his surroundings. A dungeon horrible on all sides round, as one great furnace flamed, yet from those flames no light, but rather darkness visible. For those rebellious.
See, I read between the lines on some of these accounts, and it's like, okay, let Satan tells it, because again, when we read into Revelation, right, we hear woe for the earth and the seas, right? Because the devil, the adversary, has been thrown down. Like, people, nowhere in the Bible, really do you find the hell doctrine, right? That is really a doctrine of the church. You don't find anything talking about a tormenting place for mankind. There's two places where people who were not worthy of a decent burial, right? It was Gehenna, right? Gehenna was like a city waste dump, right? And people who could not afford a decent burial or whatever, it was really like, how the Indians today, when they do the caste system, they go and burn some of the folks, right? That was Gehenna. That was not hell. And if you read that scripture, you will understand what Gehenna really was. And then the second instance in the Bible where it talks about a fiery place is Sheol, right? Sheol, humans do not go there. Humans do not go to Sheol. There is no record in the Bible that humans, except for Jesus, or went to Sheol, right? Sheol is where fallen angels go. Fallen angels go to Sheol. So they're calling it Tartarus or whatever. I've heard Tartarus before, right? But this is really what he's depicting is, to me, a volcano. Like, because they were cast down to the earth. So I think that Satan and these demons are really saying we woke up in a damn volcano. That's what it seems like to me, based off of Satan's perspective, because they were cast down to the earth. And I can't think of any other fiery place that they would wake up and be in that looked like that was round and it was fire all over the place and dark, but a damn volcano. So if this is Satan's perspective, God cast him and a third of the angels down to the earth, not to hell, right? They are among us, right? And they've been for quite some time, right? I can imagine that they were thrown into a volcano of some sort, and that is where they're waking up.
Here their prison ordained in utter darkness. and their portion set, as far removed from God and light of heaven.
And again, this is
Milton
fiction.
does a great job here contrasting the two domains. If heaven is a place in the sky full of light, then wherever Satan and the other fallen angels have woken is a dungeon, a fiery abyss where only darkness is visible, a prison for the fallen. Next to Satan is his second in command, Beelzebub. Despite the predicament they find themselves in, Satan feels no regret for his rebellion against God. In fact, he sees this time as a period of regrouping before they launch their next attack.
He's like, all right, guys, look, we're not defeated. Satan is giving Kamala Harris, I will not be defeated. Kamala looking crazy as hell these days, y'all. But he's like, I won't be defeated. So he's like, we just got to regroup, figure out where we're at. Seems like we're in a volcano, because that's where it sounds like to me. He said it's round, right? No light coming in.
Beelzebub is not so convinced. After witnessing their failure the first time, he questions whether God can be defeated. Satan doesn't dismiss this idea. Rather than another battle head-on, he suggests a new tactic. God has many beloved creatures, and so what if they were able to corrupt them using their powers and the allure of evil?
So it sounds like Satan knows that he's fighting a losing battle. You know, his homeboy Beelzebub was like, dude, look at how they just threw us out of heaven, right? I don't think that we're going to be able to beat them, the holy ones, right? They're empowered by something that we're just not anymore, right? He done stripped away our heavenly powers, right? So it's like, you know, there's heavenly spirits, right? So Beelzebub is like, dog, I don't think this is a win. This is not a fight that we can win here. All right. And Satan's like, no, we just got to re strategize, dog. Like, okay, if we can't beat them, we can hurt him. And all we got to do is just attack his precious humans or creations. Right. So this is Satan's mindset.
To do.
Oh, Lord. Let me get into the comments while this is going through. And again, this is just entertainment for me, right? It's interesting that this is one of the most profound works of art in English, you know, literary history, right? And it's the story of humanizing Satan, right? So I think it's interesting. All right, let's see. Everyone, I don't know, Chat GPT7. I don't know. Oh, I got some trolls up in here. Hold on, let's see. What are we doing? I could get ChatGPT this the opposite. Okay. What are we talking about here? Happy holidays. I see you guys. You said you're a sinner. I'm a sinner too. I am a sinner. I admit I am a sinner, but I don't willfully sin. That's the difference. Understanding, you know, some people run around and talk about something, I'm not perfect, right? And they'll be out here doing shitty things. And it's like, okay, if you can acknowledge that you're not perfect as you're doing shitty things, right? You're just a horrible person. And we pray for your soul. We pray you get that wickedness out. Get that wickedness out. Let's see. This is fiction. Okay. But, you know, and I already said that too, that this is a work of fiction, right? And Christians obviously should not be taking this literary work to heart. But I think, again, as we're kind of understanding, well, at least for me personally, as I'm kind of understanding how this world works, and I believe that this is Satan's world, it's like my whole mission now is like, I already got the Christian convictions, all right? I already got the Bible knowledge, right? My whole thing is, how do I move in Satan's world? How is Satan's world operating? How does Satan's world manipulate people? How does Satan's world get people to fall away from God, right? And what kinds of messaging, what kinds of sermons have Satan inspired human beings to push out to other human beings to actually impact how they think or believe? And so for me, exploring Paradise Lost is I want to understand how the adversary thinks. And it's not to be sympathetic to Satan or anything like that, but it's always good to know how your enemies think, What are their reoccurring things? And so that's why we're doing this. So we know that this is fiction, all right? We know it's fiction, you guys. I'm not gonna say it again. So anybody come up here and talk about something that's fiction, you getting blocked because I've already said it. All right. But I think you do need to understand how your enemies work. And especially if you are in your enemy's world and this world is pretty much governed by the spirit of your enemy, you need to know how they work. So Paradise Lost, right, for me is let me see what the devil is saying about this fall, right? And I like Paradise Lost because unlike, some of these other ancient fictional texts, right? I'm actually getting what I need from this, right? I'm getting what I need from this. It's like if Satan were to inspire a human about his experience, their experience coming down and after they were cast down, what would he inspire them to say? And this is a very interesting, to me, this seems like a very plausible explanation for what happened when those fallen angels were cast out of heaven. And, if Satan were to inspire a human to give us that delivery, I think that this is probably one of the better, his sides of the stories that I've read. So if anybody has another one, definitely hit me up. But Paradise Lost is to me a really interesting perspective from the adversary's point of view post being kicked out of heaven. So we're going to keep it moving, you guys, right? If you're a spiritually weak Christian, maybe you should not entertain this conversation because again, I don't want to weaken your faith. This is for people who do have a strong scholarly knowledge of the word. They're not super impressionable and they can understand how to read between the lines and see the broader meanings of things, beyond what is projected. So this content is for those folks.
Moloch favors the
Okay, let's
direct
go back,
approach of
'cause
open
the-
war,
I think
believing they should lay siege to
Hold
heaven
on.
once again, but this time
So-
for them to
Let me go back because we got Beelzebub's perspective. Beelzebub is just like, I don't know if we can beat them, right?
they have become. They can make themselves a new home here in hell,
Hang
and to
on.
mark this day, they
And so he keeps referring to it as hell.
is a proxy war, halfway in between heaven and hell, using God's favorite creations. Now with a
Okay, here we go. Let's go back because we got hit with just back-to-back YouTube commercials. All right, come on. Come on, why is it buffering?
evil. To do aught good will never be our task, but ever to do ill our sole delight, as being contrary to his high will whom we resist. If then his providence out of our evil seek to bring forth a good, our labour must be to pervert that end, and out of good to still find means of evil. Rather than another battle in heaven, what Satan is recommending is a proxy war, halfway in between heaven and hell, using God's favorite creations. Now with a plan, the two angels spread their wings and leave this river of fire. Many argue here that they did not break free of their chains. Instead, they were allowed to leave because this was not the punishment that God intended. Flying above, they scour the land and come to the conclusion that it's
So I
better to
like
reign
that
in
this was mentioned, right? Because again, if we're reading as Christians that, okay, they were thrown out of heaven, down the great dragon was hurled, and, the devil, Satan, and he's hot with anger, knowing that his time is short, right? So, I can imagine, right? These fallen angels, they are down to earth. They're invisible people. They're invisible men. It's not like we can see them unless we entreat them through divinations, and even then, you get things from different ways, from energies from these people, these beings. But off that, it's like, what did they do when they got down here, right? And it seems like, they woke up, right? They're like, Okay, that was a horrible battle. We lost. Okay, what should we do? You have all these different people who have ideas, right? Beelzebub is like, man, we're defeated. We should just hope that God will one day forgive us. And, Moloch is like, nah, man, no, we shouldn't do that, right? We should just bring hell. Like, we should just, and so Moloch and Lucifer, they're on code with each other, right? They are on code. They're like, this is exactly what we're gonna do. We're gonna live our life basically attacking God's favorite creations, the humans, right? So that's where they're at.
In hell than serve in heaven. Once on land, Satan calls out to his fellow fallen angels and beckons them to his cause. The speech had its desired effect as the fallen angels were woken from their slumber. They gathered around Satan, who informed them that they had been erased from the Book of Life and the other books in heaven. But all was not lost, as even demons could be worshipped like gods in the eyes of man. During this speech, we learn the names of a few more fallen angels turned demons. Moloch, the king of human sacrifice, and the lustful Belial.
So we're talking about Moloch, so we're talking about your Epsteins, your Diddy's, any of your child sacrifice, pedophile type folks, human sacrifice type folks, allegedly, right? With Diddy. These people are typically rooted in some form of ritualism to Moloch. It's in some of your Illuminati people, they'll know this really deeply because they know they need blood sacrifices to summon those demons. Moloch won't even talk to you without the blood of a child. We know this, right? So Moloch is one of the demons that, one of the head demons, if you will, that we're introduced to in the story.
Belial. By the end of this speech, Satan had taken thousands
Belial,
of wounded
demon
and
of
disheveled
lust.
angels and turned them into an army that once again believed in a cause. Rather than be ashamed of their actions, they should instead embrace their evil nature and be...
So this is where Satan really just goes all in on the unaccountability train. It's just like, we're not evil. We're not bad. We should be able to do whatever we want to do, be worshiped like gods, right? And cause all kinds of pandemonium without any type of recourse. Screw the divine balance. We want to do things our way, right? So they essentially set out to make themselves gods. And, it's interesting. I'm not sure if Milton actually read the Book of Enoch, right? But he's almost mirroring a lot of those conflicts in there, right? And like I said, like when I read the Book of Enoch, which I'm still on the fence about the Book of Tobit and all those other little extra books, the Book of Jubilees, even though Book of Jubilees is a believable book to me because it doesn't deviate from anything that has been historically said. And I do believe that, when you're talking about accounts from people who weren't popular, like the prophets, right, or these inspired folks, right, you still have the people and the people in the villages sharing those stories. So these prophets weren't the only ones that knew about the prophecies, right? You're talking about Hezekiah, right? He was repeating prophecies, right? These, when you're talking about, for example, when Israel was being prophesied to get judgments for the Assyrians were going to subdue them, right? That prophecy went for at least 3 books of the Bible before it was fulfilled, right? So you got prophets who knew about prophecies like, 10, hundreds of years before they even came to pass, right? Hang on for 1 second. Let me go back in here. All right, so let's see. I don't believe in heaven, so okay, that's fine. This isn't your conversation, and if they have Jesus in their heart, they will be under. I don't have a religion, so I'm not sure what you're talking about. I'm divorced from organized religions. Let's see. Wow, this is going fast. Like, like hang on. Let's see. Jules, Jay-Z, and Beyonce. Well, I heard Beyonce practice some spiritism stuff. Let's see. You said, "Am I evil?" I don't know. I don't know you from Adam, so we don't know. But if you do some evil, evil is evil, right? And give me. Well, you said so. The creator of, like, this is interesting, right? So you obviously have not read the story of the Bible for you to even ask this question, right? You said so. The creator of all the entire universe only about talked about a handful of desert tribes in a small portion of the world. Okay, so if you kind of understand what Abraham's purpose was, it was before Abraham. There were just the nations, right? There was no, and all of the nations on the earth, they were polytheistic for the most part. You had a few people who knew who the God of Enoch and Noah were, right? Because obviously Noah's sons, his family, they were telling those stories, which were mandated by God for them to tell. So you did have some people who worship Yahweh, the God of Abraham, right? But for the most part, the nations were all over the place. This is why God isolated Abraham to create a nation of, or Yahweh created a nation of people using Abraham's seed to be an example. There was not supposed, and I think it's interesting because Black Jews, white Jews, some of them, I would say not all of them, they operate with this weird ass supremacy that because it was through Abraham's seed, right? And that the nation of Israel was born, right? That somehow that made them more special than any other human beings. And that was true up until a point. The nation of Israel, they were more special, more protected than any of the other nations when they remained in covenant with their God, right? Unlike the other nations who, again, they worship several different gods, right? And so there needed to be an example on this earth of one nation who worshipped a monotheistic God, right? And that was Abraham. He chose Abraham and his seed to create that nation. But of course, the nation of Israel screwed themselves up. And I think they kind of screwed humanity over too, because honestly, if they would have just stayed in covenant, right, we would have had more of a pure faith. But unfortunately, they screwed up, and this is how we got to the new covenant, right? So now God's people, or Israel, is comprised of both Jews and the Gentiles, right? But you got to know that to understand how that isolation of the nation of Israel happened in the first place, right? All right, let's see. You said to serve the interests of a few. Well, let's just think about it like this. If everybody is worshiping like every other god but the God who created the universe, right? Because you have these other his fallen sons who have created, materialized themselves into deities, right? Because again, we're reading Paradise Lost, right? This is their mission. They want to be worshiped according to Milton. And if we were to take this as an inspired perspective from Satan, right? They wanted to be worshiped as gods, right? So that is just to say,
Be proud of the demons they have
that
become.
all of these gods and renditions of gods that mankind has kind of saw, post flood, right? This, the all of the nations were practicing idol worship and worshiping false gods. That is why there needed to be one specific standout nation among all of those nations practicing those things that would be an example of a people in covenant with one God, right? And who abided by his laws. And God's laws does not require humans to kill other humans. God's laws does not require humans to sacrifice their children, right? But there are a lot of these false gods, deities, demons that people worship that actually requires those things. In fact, the only time I really remember in the Bible of God requiring somebody to sacrifice their life was Isaac and Jesus, right? And even then, Abraham was not going to kill his son. That would like really that was a test of his faith because Satan was like, okay, well, look at, he kind of pulled a Job on him with Abraham, right? And I mean, you look at Abraham, it was like, I'm gonna do what God want me to do, right? But this is very hurtful. Isaac was like, yeah, I'll sacrifice my life for God, right? But it didn't happen. Abraham ended up sacrificing a ram, right? God stopped his hand because he didn't want him to kill his son. He just wanted him to demonstrate that he loved him more than he loved his son, which was the argument of Satan, basically. And so it's one of those things where you just got to understand the full context of the scriptures. Just it does benefit you.
They can make themselves a new home here
These
in
gods
hell,
want you
and to
killing
mark
folks
this day, they construct
and doing
a
all
great
kinds of
temple
debauched
in the
things.
city known as Pandemonium,
And these are the gods of
which in
Hollywood
Greek
and
means
industry.
all the demons and all the spirits in Latin. Pandemonium became the focal point where all the demons gathered for council.
So if you read the book of Enoch, right? And again, I look at Enoch as a parallel to Dante, Satan again mocking the scriptures with Dante's Inferno. Because again, I look at what Dante did was the same thing. Enoch went through the levels of heaven, right? Dante goes through the levels of hell. And each level is different and has a different reality, right? Same thing with the book of Enoch. So I feel like these satanic folks or inspired folks, they're always inspired by God in some kind of way.
In the first gathering here, Satan is honest with his peers. The war in heaven was difficult, and it might just be impossible for them to ever retake heaven. He opens the floor to anyone who wants to speak, and up steps Moloch. Moloch favors the direct approach of open war, believing they should lay siege to heaven once again, but this time using the newfound weapons of hell. Moloch is driven by revenge and anger. To him, there is nothing worse than their fate in hell, not even death. And so there is nothing to lose by striking now, when those in heaven least expect them to do so. To him, there is no downside to this plan. Either way, they are free from hell. Next to speak is a much calmer Belial. He believes their punishment could be even worse if they choose to attack heaven again. There might come a time where God even forgives them for their betrayal, but Belial doesn't necessarily advocate for peace. They should wait and see what God has planned for them and then act upon the matter. Next to step forward is Mammon. He doesn't call for war either, but also accepts that he will never bow down to God again. Mammon calls for industry. They are free to do as they please in hell. If they work together, they can make hell a kingdom as great as heaven. This idea is met by applause and garnered the most support from his fellow demons.
So Mammon was like, look guys, we got kicked out, right? I don't want to worship God. I don't want to bow down to him anymore. Like Screw Father is what Mammon is saying, right? We got this whole little shindig that he done threw us down in. Why don't we just kind of set up shop, make this little hell place a little hype squad place and just, set up an operation here. Like everybody loves this idea. They're like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like we're free, right? They're free. They're free from the rules and the divine balance of their father, right? It's like a teenager, right? In a sheltered home, right? You get sheltered all the time, and then all of a sudden you move out, then you start rebelling against everything your parent taught you, right? They're kind of like in this mindset, even though they've been kicked out of the house, right? Some of them are pissed off that they got kicked out of heaven. Some of them are like, guys, this isn't so bad. I mean, at least we don't have to deal with those rules, right? So they're trying to find the brighter side, if you will, to the darkness that they're in. Sounds like a lot of humans, right? Just coping. You screw up, and then they're just trying to talk themselves into a bright side.
Beelzebub, who also wishes to be free of God's servitude. He tells his peers of stories he heard in heaven, the creation of a new world that would be populated by man, a new race that God loves even more than angels. They can have their revenge by corrupting and destroying these humans without another war. This suggests...
Now, so this is an interesting part of the poem, because according to Beelzebub, right, he's saying that, I heard that God was creating this new world. Well, see, that's kind of fallacious, right? Because in the first 7 days, right, of creation, right, humans were not part of that. We were not created in the first 7 days. It was heaven, earth, and the spiritual sons. So Beelzebub would have been created when the earth was created, like around and so, he would have known that, right? And and he definitely would have known that God created mankind too, because the angels were there too. And again, you got to read the book of Enoch to kind of understand that side of the house. Because again, the Bible is going to give you more of the human history side, the stories of the fleshly sons. The Apocrypha gives you the stories of the spiritual sons. And I think any reasonable Christian, right, as you're exploring the deeper meanings of God, you have to make concessions that God made earthly and spiritual sons, and that the Bible is really centered on the earthly sons. They're not talking really about, it's not centering in full detail about the war in heaven and what the conflicts in heaven were. And honestly, you got to know what the conflicts in heaven were to really understand what's transpiring here on the earth. So, again, believe what you want, but I do believe that the book of Enoch is a great source for understanding the spiritual sons side of the house. And again, it doesn't usurp anything that we've read in the canonical 66 books.
Suggestion garners even more support than the idea put forward by Mammon.
So they're with Beelzebub. We're just going to screw over and corrupt humanity.
By Beelzebub and Satan that is chosen as their plan of action. It is Satan who volunteers to leave hell and scout for this promised land. With Satan gone, the council reconvenes and discusses how to...
And maybe Beelzebub is not talking about the earth. I got to go back and listen to that again. Maybe he's talking about the land of Canaan, which is the promised land. So that is probably what Beelzebub is talking about, because he's like, we're going to find this promised land. So he's probably talking about the land of Canaan, which is modern day Israel.
A kingdom that can rival...
Okay, let the commercials go while let me see if we can. All right.
Heaven. Satan now has the rather difficult task of finding a way out of hell. Eventually, he reaches the gates, of which there are 9 in total, 3 made from brass, 3 from iron, and lastly 3 from adamantine. Guarding these gates, he sees 2 figures in the distance. A woman with the lower half of a serpent surrounded by a pack of dogs, and the second is shrouded in darkness. These 2 figures are known as Sin and Death. Satan confronts this woman and demands that he is allowed to pass. Now, this is where things start to get strange. She asks him if he has forgotten who they are. She then explains that they are his children, sin and death. From his actions as an angel, sin was created, springing forth from his head. She was then impregnated by Satan, giving birth to death, who then in turn impregnated sin, and this time she gave birth to a pack of hounds that follow and torment her. Satan's children were responsible for guarding the gates of hell, as well as the keys needed to open them. He soon realizes that his children can be
So it's interesting, right? Because they're saying that Satan, I guess through his rebellion, he gave birth to sin and death. So he gave birth to this spirit and this outcome. So sin and death, before Eve even entered the picture, before Eve even sinned, sin and death, according to, Milton, in this, again, rendition of Satan's side of the story, sin and death were already created before Adam and Eve sinned. So they did not bring sin and death into the world, right? It was actually Satan who brought sin and death into the world, but it was through their rebellion that they brought sin and death to humanity. And this is Satan telling a story. Now, the devil is a liar most times, but this is interesting to note that, when we read in the Bible, it talks about how, it was through one man, Adam, that sin and death enter into the world. I'm wondering if that was among humanity, the world of humanity, because clearly Satan is saying that I created sin and death before Adam and Eve were even created and sinned. You know what I mean? I did that. So again, the devil is a liar. He's always trying to take credit. But again, if the devil is trying to take credit for giving birth to sin and death, right? One would question, why would God give birth to sin and death, right? But it is a consequence, though. Both of those things are interchangeable.
Persuaded to join his cause. After explaining the plot for vengeance against God, his children, as planned, are persuaded, and sin, using the keys, unlocks the gates of hell. Ahead of him is only darkness, but Satan chooses to leave hell and fly straight into the darkness.
So let me get into the chat here. And again, if you are interested in looking at this overview, again, check out the channel. Hang on, where are they at? Let me close some of this because it's just taking up too much. Had a lot of research open.
Shalom, friends. We are here at the Mada headquarters in Jerusalem. This is...
What? Right,
caught in a storm, Satan falls through the sky until he catches a ride on a cloud. Flying blindly towards the noise he can hear, he finds himself in the presence of chaos
going on, everybody?
And
I see the chat
rulers
moving.
Of this dark abyss. I come no spy, with purpose to explore or to disturb the secrets of your realm, ensuring chaos and night that he means no ill will. He finds himself explaining his plan once again, and asking for assistance to find this new world. By claiming this new world and corrupting it with evil, Satan claims that chaos can also reign here freely, which is enough to convince them to join his cause.
I've been interested in this book for a minute, man.
A new world has been created, and Satan assumes that this must be the prophesied.
Okay, let me go back here. Sorry, you guys. I removed myself from the chat for a second there, but what's going on, everybody? Ron, let's see. Satan taking credit for evil, right? Like, I mean, but hey, he's a narcissist, remember? So he gonna take credit for everything. He Satan, yeah, he definitely. But you think about it, like just the spirits of Satan, though, right? That are attributed to Satan: narcissism, jealousy, control, like power hungry. These are spirits that manifest amongst humans, right? These are actually spirits that are, to me, diseases that have festered in humans, right? So, I mean, the world is definitely in Satan's image, okay?
Explaining his
Whether you want
plan
to
once
believe that or
again
not, it
and
really
asking
is.
for assistance to find this new world. By claiming this new world and corrupting it with evil, Satan claims that chaos can also reign here freely, which is enough to convince them to join his cause. Chaos points to where a new world has been created, and Satan assumes that this must be the prophesied earth, created by God for mankind. Sin and death follow slowly behind Satan, creating a bridge from hell to this new world, which will allow the demons of hell to easily travel back and forth between the two. In Book 3, we shift perspective to heaven, where God has been watching everything transpire. He can see Satan traveling to earth, and knows that this will lead to the fall of man. The free will he gave to man is what will lead to this corruption and downfall. However, it is the free will to love that makes man different from the angels and God's other creations. Back to Satan, who has now found Earth. When he lands, he sees an enormous gate that has a stairway that he assumes connects Earth to heaven. Satan sees God's creation in all its glory and feels an overwhelming jealousy. Drawn in by the sun, he comes across an angel standing on a hill that he recognizes as Archangel Uriel. Satan takes the form of a cherub and approaches Uriel. He lies to Uriel, telling him he has just come down from heaven, curious about this new world and its inhabitants.
And so, it's interesting with this point because, like, Satan, if he's telling the truth through this inspiration, through this human, right, is telling you that angels aren't all knowing, that angels themselves can be tricked, especially by other angels, right? Because according to Satan, right, this is post getting thrown out of heaven, he was able to escape this hell that they were in, if you will, hellhole that they were in, right? And he was able to kind of scout around and look for the new world, and he sees the Archangel Uriel, right? And so he's able, and this is interesting because Milton is alluding that, these fallen angels, they still had powers, they still had transformative powers. And it kind of, that definitely makes sense too, because when you think about it, there were a number of like demons on the roads of conflicts taking over men who practice divinations and different things. So it's interesting that he is putting this in there. Um, and yeah, we know he's a fallen angel, right? We know he's a fallen angel, but it's interesting how they still had powers to morph and move their bodies in different ways. Now, mind you, this story, Paradise Lost, is actually taking place at creation, right? It's not taking place during Enoch's time. Enoch wasn't even born. Adam was um Enoch's grandfather, 5 generations removed from Enoch. Adam was, or Enoch was 5 generations removed from Adam. So Adam was his great great grandfather. But, we're talking about before the great flood. We're talking about before the human beings even populated the earth and started creating nations and nations of people, right? So this is before all of that is where Paradise Lost, the time frame that it's taking place. So
inhabitants,
We're just at
Uriel is unable
creation
to
and
see
Adam and
past
Eve.
Satan's disguise, and is actually rather happy to see an angel come down from heaven with an... Listen,
Jesus, they are just full of commercials.
interest in learning about this new world that God has created. He even makes the mistake of showing him paradise where Adam and Eve live. Satan thanks Uriel for sharing his knowledge and flies off into the distance with the information he came for. Satan lands on Mount Nephites as he contemplates the task ahead of him. Seeing the beauty of Eden and paradise reminds him of a time in heaven when he still possessed his innocence. He begins to have an internal struggle, and unknown to him, Archangel Uriel is watching this unfold. He questions whether he could ever return to heaven if he was to repent, but he concludes it would never be the same, and he is now past the point of redemption. The only way...
So in this rendition, obviously his pride is keeping him from repenting from his arrogance and narcissism. And so he has to stay the course. And how many humans do we know who are like that, right? Where they can't admit that they're wrong and they will literally go the distance, right? Because they can't admit that they're wrong.
The only way forward for him is to stick to the plan of spreading evil and sin to this paradise.
So he had to
Uriel notices multiple different facial expressions and rapid change in demeanor, something you would never see from a cherub, as they are joyous beings. Now he begins to suspect that this cherub was actually someone trying to deceive him. He travels to heaven to inform the Archangel
you taking my joy away
that
from
one
me
of
with
the
all your
fallen
little facial
angels may have
expressions,
found
like,
Eden. Together they vow to find this
you on?
imposter by morning. Satan has essentially overcome his doubts and decides to enter Eden. Standing tallest of all the trees is the Tree of Life, and next to it is the Tree of Knowledge. Satan transforms himself into a bird and perches on the branches of the Tree of Knowledge. Looking down, he observes the many different animals. However, his attention is drawn to two creatures in particular that stand upright on two legs. Filled with rage and jealousy, Satan remembers why he came to paradise. These two beings must be the new race that was created in his fall. He watches Adam and Eve and overhears their conversation. Adam is telling Eve that she must be obedient to God, because this paradise is only possible because of him. She shouldn't complain about the work they have to do, because...
Okay, so there's a couple of things that I want to call to attention to with the Book of Enoch. And I'm going to keep going back from here to there with the Book of Enoch sometimes. But in the Book of Enoch, we read about the conversation of Michael, the chief archangel, upon the creation of mankind. And that's why some of this timeline of this is a little off for me, because Satan was aware of these creations, right? It was actually the fact that we were created that really enraged him, because again, you have your spiritual sons, your fleshly sons, right? And in the Book of Enoch, Michael, the chief angel in heaven, he said he calls all the angels together and upon the creation of Adam, and he tells them to behold and exalt man. And a lot of those angels felt like that was problematic, right? They're like, them? Like, they felt like humans should worship them, right? And this has been an ongoing theme, whether it's fictional, literary, or ancient scrolls and texts that have been discovered. The ongoing theme is these spiritual sons wanting the fleshly sons to worship them, not exalting us, right? And again, I always tell people, when you really kind of dig down deep, even though, you have a lot of humans that want to be angels, but when you really kind of go back and you look at least biblical histories, it was the angels that wish that they could be humans. Why? Because God made us more like him than he did them. They don't procreate. They weren't made to procreate. They were made for specific reasons, right? But they had to steal that, right? Remember the Nephilim guys, right? They had to steal that ability. They had to come down, take on the flesh of man, right? And procreate. And this is where you get your dinosaurs and your dragons, right? And I'm pretty sure that there are some human fossils that are just as big as those. But again, they don't want the Bible to be true, right? If we had the human fossils, then people would be like, oh, prehistoric times, that was really the days of Noah? Yeah, it was. It was. Got another word, though.
Because it means they can roam and freely explore this paradise with only one rule: never to eat the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge. As night falls, Gabriel and the other angels begin to search the garden. They find Satan, who has switched his disguise from a bird to a toad, and they bring him before Gabriel. He immediately sees through this disguise and recognizes Satan, demanding to know what business he has in the Garden of Eden. Satan tells Gabriel that he means no harm, and they have no reason to suspect anything. Better hope
Wow.
made.
The devil really gonna put them commercials in there. Lord. Hang on, y'all. The devil, like, stop talking about me. Here's 1,000 commercials every 2 minutes. We rebuke you, Satan.
Anything else. Gabriel once again is not convinced. Not willing to deal with any more of Satan's lies, he tells him that he will send him back to hell if he does not confess. All this threat succeeds in doing is enraging Satan to the point of a physical confrontation. As both angels posture, they are interrupted by a pair of golden scales, a sign from heaven. Knowing his own strength as well as Gabriel's, Satan interprets these scales as a sign he cannot win this battle.
So
And
basically, God was like, if you even touch Gabriel, he gonna beat your ass all the way back to hell. Like, you don't have a chance, right? And this is the interesting thing about Satan and the fallen, is they know they don't have a chance, right? They operate with having zero to lose, right? They've accepted their fate, right? And when you are dealing with things that have accepted a fate that is destruction, or imminent death, right? Right? That misery is going to love company, right? Misery loves company. Lucifer could not just rebel by himself, right? He had to rally a whole bunch of people around, turn all those angels into activists, kind of like what the Democrats are doing to our newer generations, right? They're inflaming them with some passionate, struggle and fight, right? Fight, 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 right? This is what they put in these young people's mind, right? You need that herd of mentality of lemmings, right? Following a cause that they believe is righteous, right? So a lot of those angels fell with him. He couldn't just fall by himself. They fell with him, right? And I bet you some of those angels, right? Because I was listening to this guy. He used to practice demonology, and he used to tap into these energies, and he said that he's felt like he's been saved by Christ, right? But he said that he was saying that when he was practicing, those things, what did he say? He said that they would like tell him certain things, right? And what did he say that they said? I want to get it right, or at least paraphrase it the right way. It's like he said they know that there is a war coming. They're preparing for a war, right? Like they understand where they are at in the timeline of man. And he said that, people think that like demons are just running around. He was like, actually, they're very war-minded. If you could compare demons to any organized group of people on this earth, it would be the military industrial complexes, right? They organize like that. And so it's interesting, when those people who do tap into demons and they're able to, and the thing is, if he's getting that information, I live by the code of plausible deniability, y'all. I sing that old Negro hymn really quickly. If it ain't got shit to do with me, then it ain't got shit to do with me. I said, if it ain't got shit to do with me, then it ain't got shit to do with me. Oh Lord, plausible deniability. I don't want to hear shit about shit, right? I'm not that all ears type of person, right? And it's better not to be like that. But I would not dare ask that guy, what type of human sacrifice did you really put up to get that information? Right? Because he wasn't going to get that information without blood sacrifice. And most people know this. The demons aren't out there just giving information for free. You got to tap into them. You got to practice divinations or incantations of some sort. And they have to have some special interest in you. Right? You don't choose them. You don't just wake up and say, I'm going to worship Moloch. Right? Like, it doesn't work like that. You can be trying to worship Moloch into the end of your days, and Moloch may not ever show up for you outside of making your life devastating, right? But other than that, they're not checking for humans. They hate us. But there are certain humans they have a special interest in, because there are some humans on this earth that do, there are some humans that are born with higher energies than majority of humans. And that's just what it is. And they know how like Elon Musk is a high frequency humans. The demons probably love him all day, right? There's a lot of human beings on this earth that are very high frequency and they love them. They absolutely love humans like them. Majority of them, not so much. They will get demonized by the demons before they actually have direct interaction. But when somebody tells me that they've communicated with demons and they've actually shared plans with them or visions or strategies or even their sentiments, right? That person put out a blood sacrifice of some sort. They've done something very, very defiled to be able to even get tapped in like that. And I truly do believe it.
So he decides to flee. In book 5, we have an
So Satan didn't
interaction.
want to get his ass beat by Gabriel, because Gabriel's getting ready to just kind of flex up with him, and he was like, no. Again, when you put Satan in real perspective, right? Even Satan knows that there are forces that can destroy him, beat his ass, right? So, I mean, and again, this is all like, you have to have some level of belief system and this stuff to sort of connect the dots to what I'm saying.
Between Adam and Eve, where she describes a dream she had. In this dream, Eve was woken by voices that she could hear coming from the tree of knowledge. Following the whispers, she then sees what she believes is an angel eating fruit from the tree. The angel encourages Eve to taste for herself. Here, happy creature, fair angelic Eve, partake thou also. Happy thou though art.
So according to Satan in his rendition in Paradise Lost, he was actually infiltrating Eve's dreams to plant the seed and suggestion of her partaking in the knowledge of the fruit of the tree of good and bad, long before she, not long, but before she even did it, right? He was in her dreams, right? In her dreams, right? Planting seeds, right? And obviously, Eve was very vulnerable, right? She was, arguably younger than Adam, right? Most of the direction that Eve was getting mandates that Eve were getting were from Adam, or so we thought. But according to Satan's rendition of it, it was really Gabriel that told it to both of them, explained because supposedly, according to Satan's rendition, right, the angels knew he had his eye on the Garden of Eden, right? Him and Gabriel got into a little squabble and he had to flee, right? Because he didn't want to get that ass beat, right? So he fled, right? And then he decides that, okay, I'm going to start planting the seeds for these people to rebel against Father too, right? So he starts with her dreams. And because she was so young and still malleable and learning, it was easy for him to manipulate and persuade her in that manner because, again, she's not firmly established like her husband. And we don't know what the duration between Adam's creation and Eve was. They don't give us specific days and times. We know Adam was created. He went on doing work by himself, naming the animals, farming, doing his thing. And then God was like, it's not good for him to go along, go by himself. Adam didn't decide. And here's the thing for some of these chauvinists, right? Because it is truth, though. Adam never asked for a woman. Adam never asked for a mate. Adam didn't even know that he was lonely. He didn't even know he's looking at these, he's naming the animals, and I'm pretty sure he realized, like, hey, this one looks different than this one in every species, right? But, there's just me, right? So God said it's not good for him to continue alone, right? I will make for him a complement. I will make for him a helper, right? Nowhere do you find that, God created Eve to be Adam's servant, right? She was a complement. She was a helper to him, right? And obviously she was going to be the key to expanding the human race for them. So that's just
Happier
for some of,
thou mayst be,
these folks who
worthier
like to
canst
make
not
arguments
be.
about the order of the
Taste this,
household.
and
It's
be
like
henceforth
women are not
among the
servants
gods,
to men. They
thyself a
serve their
goddess,
men
not to
if they're a
earth
holy woman,
confined.
but they were
The
not
angel is
created to
trying
be
to persuade
servants.
Eve by insinuating she could become a goddess by merely tasting the fruit. Before Eve is able to do so, the angel disappears and she wakes from her dream. Adam is fairly concerned, but does his best to reassure Eve that this was just a dream and not an indication of the future, because Eve, just like Adam, has free will, the gift given by God. At this point, God is fully aware of Satan's plan. However, he still believes his human creation can exercise their free will. He sends for the archangel Raphael, instructing him to go to Eden and explain why the fruit is forbidden, or at least explain the differences between food that is considered earthly and heavenly. At least then it has been explained to them. When Satan comes...
And, again, while we're dealing with another commercial every 2 seconds, right? And it's interesting, right? Because, in Genesis, right, we don't get this thorough explanation. I don't believe that the book of Genesis is the first book of the Bible. I believe that the book of Enoch is the book of the Bible. Obviously, I can understand the apostates, their interest in omitting that book and watering it down with Genesis, but it's not the first book of the Bible in my world, and I don't even accept Genesis as the first book of the Bible. It's just not. And I know a lot of people for years have accepted that. But again, if you're a real biblical scholar, right, I would say the book of Enoch is way more thorough, right? It's just way more thorough. Genesis just leaves you just dry.
I'm Patrick
It's
Stewart.
like an overview summary
I
of the book of
believe
Enoch. That's what
in
somebody
helping
did.
people.
They literally took the
comes,
book of
both
Enoch and
Adam
was like,
and
let's
Eve
make a
know
summary of
that
just this and
eating
make
from
it
the
Genesis.
tree is forbidden. If they choose to exercise their free will knowing this, then their punishments are their own. Raphael does explain these differences to Adam, who in turn is expected to relay...
So according to Satan, God specifically sent an angel down to Adam and Eve to explain to them, the earthly fruits versus the heavenly fruits, right? And he did this with the intent of saying that, okay, we know that Satan has his eyes on them, but they have free will, and so God still had faith in humanity that they would still do right by His divine balance, right? And so He took it according to Satan, and see, here's the thing, Satan obviously you would think I'm gonna narrate Father to be this horrible, terrible person, and I'm not going to really narrate him to say anything. I'm not going to narrate him favorably. But even Satan is saying, well, God did give the humans a chance. He educated them about this tree, right? So when I came in and was able to manipulate them into sinning against God, right? They couldn't really blame it on anybody but themselves because they had the free will and the knowledge, right? And they still chose to go the other way, right? And this is the same dilemma for humans these days, right? It is the same dilemma for humans these days. A lot of us have free will, many of us have knowledge, but yet we will still do things that will devastate our lives or other people, with intent, right? And so that is the thing. Eve's intent was to be like God. And she convinced her husband that that should also be your intent. You can be a god and I can be a goddess, right? And so they were able to be deceived because of this. So if this is according to Milton, this is Satan's
when Adam
rendition
questions
of it.
why
Again,
any creature of God would willingly disobey him, Raphael tells him the story of Satan and his fall from grace as a cautionary tale. Heaven was always a place of peace, until the day God announced he had created a son that he wished to rule with him. One angel in particular took
now it's interesting because again, people
issue with this and voiced his frustration and anger. That angel would be stripped of his heavenly name, and for his disobedience he would be known as Satan.
All right. So this is where, people will vehemently disagree with me, and that's fine. This is just the way that I assess things based off of all of the ancient texts that I've been able to read throughout my life. I do believe that, and I did a video on this before, and you got to really put all of the text together to understand what I'm saying and where I'm going with this. I do believe that Yahusha or Jesus, I do believe that that is his earthly name. Just like Satan is, among other names, is his earthly name, right? Lucifer was his heavenly name, right? And I grapple with this quite a bit too. Because in this rendition, right, Satan is saying that, or in this rendition, we hear this angel stating that God created a son that was going to rule with him, right? And when we read in the Bible, it says God gave his only begotten son as a ransom or a sacrifice to mankind, right? Who was that son in heaven? Because Yahusha is a God. He just wasn't a God on earth. He was a God in heaven. Who was he? Right? If we know that Lucifer was Satan, that was who he was, when that was his heavenly name, right? Who was Jesus? And I personally believe that Jesus was Michael the Archangel. And when you read the book of Enoch, Michael plays an integral part in God's purpose every step of the way, right? And I do believe that in Lucifer's narcissism, right, I think that he wasn't just jealous of mankind. I think that he was personally jealous of God's son. I think he was jealous of Michael. And then I go back and look at the conflicts in the Bible, right? Older brother versus younger brother. You see these brothers on brothers. It's almost like you got one good brother and one bad brother, right? And so I often wonder who Lucifer was really jealous of, which one of those sons. And the reason why I feel like it's Michael, the chief archangel, who came down and sacrificed himself to for humans, because he was the highest angel. He was higher than any of the other angels. And when you think about the argument between Lucifer and the fallen, they did not want to exalt humans. They did not want to praise humans, right? When you think about if Michael is Jesus, he came down and it wasn't just sacrificing, God giving his son as a sacrifice for humanity. Jesus was demonstrating it wasn't just a testimony for us. It was a testimony to the fallen angels as well, who were lower than him. I do believe that Michael, the chief angel, is Yahusha the king, and in his heavenly form, I think Michael is king. Or you can say Yahusha is king, but I think that Jesus, Yahusha, those are his earthly name. Those are his earthly names, and in heaven he's Michael. And I think that it makes sense that he's Michael because, again, he was the highest of all the other angels. His name means like God. And I think that, again, him weakening himself, because he didn't just come down here to sacrifice himself. Jesus was humiliated by humans. When you really think about some of the things and the accounts that Jesus went through with those wicked ass Sanhedrins and the scribes and the Pharisees, right? Even down to his death, right? Humans were, there were a lot of people who were wicked towards Jesus, right? It was kind of like, for those fallen angels, I'm pretty sure that they hated seeing him go through that. But that's what that demonologist told me. He said that, like, some of the demons that he talked to, they admitted that when Jesus was crucified, that they were actually heartbroken and sad. And they were heartbroken and sad, according to him, right? Because he's the one talking to the demons, not me. But he said they were heartbroken and sad because, he did what they could not do at the simplest form. And so I think that these fallen angels, I think Satan, they know that, I think Jesus' sacrifice, it was a testimony to them on how this is how you weaken yourself to humans, right? And it's so interesting because we as humans, we tend to elevate angels, and we want to be like angels, right? But again, you're listening to these reoccurring things from Satan's rendition and the Bible, that human beings by far were his favorite creation. And everything that he did was good, right? He created all these species, by all of them, his favorite were humans. And obviously human beings have learned and been conditioned to turn their backs on him. All right, let's finish this up, and then I'm going to get off because I didn't expect it to be this long.
Most loyal
but
and
check out
trusted
this again. This is from Mythology and Fiction Explained. If you've never read Paradise Lost and you don't really have the, mindset to sit there and read Old English or whatever like that, this is a great overview of that. And if you guys want, I'll make sure I link this video in the comments of this live stream so you guys can check it out yourself without my commentary. But I'm just breaking down some of the parallels, that I'm hearing here versus what I've read in the Bible, and just kind of making sense of some things here from the devil. The devil is giving us his perspective.
angels.
Courtesy
Satan
of John
believed
Milton.
he deserved to rule alongside God, and thus the rebellion began. Satan convinced a third of the angels to join his cause and contest the rule in heaven. A rebellious angel by the name of Abdiel eventually saw the error of his ways and tried to convince Satan that this was not a battle that could be won. Abdiel then asked God for forgiveness, which was granted, showing that for those who seek it, there will always be redemption. This discussion
And see,
continues
that's
on
the
into
problem
Book
with the
6,
devil,
where
though. It's
Raphael
like,
discusses the war in heaven in some more detail.
okay.
It ends with Raphael telling Adam that Satan and the other fallen angels have already begun plotting the fall of mankind. He wishes to lead Adam and Eve down the path of sin. They must be weary and fearful of Satan, but they must also be brave enough to resist him. In Books 7 and 8, Adam inquires about the creation of the world.
So again, Milton has given us Satan's story, right? Satan's perspective, right? And so, again, Satan understands what it takes to be favorable, right? He understands, what it takes to be favorable in God's eyes and kind of stay within that divine balance. But he's so knee deep in his pride and his arrogance. Even with repentance being on the table, right? He can't seek it, right? And there's a lot of people out here, right? It's like they're living in regret for lifestyles or whatever like that, but they feel like they're so knee deep in it that God won't ever forgive them for the things that they've done. And it's just like repentance is a powerful thing. Repentance means that you have deep hate and disdain and regret for your lifestyle and how you were living, and that you want to turn away from it, right? And you want to abandon it. And when you abandon that lifestyle, right, you start getting more peace and reconciliation, right? Because the power of God is now going to be working with you, right? A lot of people, they are spiritually sick and they don't want to be spiritually well because they're stuck on their sin. They're stuck on their sin and thinking that God is so unloving that he, of all things existing, would not forgive them. And again, I think that a person who doesn't know God is in a way better position to get forgiveness than, say, a person like me, right? If I move forward with sinning and doing things against God at this point in my life and my spiritual understanding, I would be sinning against the Holy Spirit. And there is no forgiveness for that. Okay, once you understand the word of God, you are at the point where you're delivering it, you're a disciple, right? And you turn away from doing what is right, you sin against the Holy Spirit, right? And that's when you really don't have the forgiveness. There's a lot of people who are lukewarm, they don't know God, right? Some people don't want to know God, right? And so they're operating how they operate, and that we can't really control these people. But if you're a person saying that you're of faith, right, you can't be operating like other people. You got to stand out. You have to be separate from this world. You got to be that weirdo that people are just like, everybody's saying this and you're saying that, right? You can't be in everybody's herd of mentality, right? That's what real spiritual people, they understand that. We are separate from the world. We're going to sound weird, right? Some of these Satanists, they're going to be like, you guys are mentally ill because you believe in God. Meanwhile, they're riddled with mental illness, real mental illness, and they got disgusting, wicked souls that pretty much eats them alive every day. When you got the power of God, y'all don't have the same problems. We just really don't. We just don't.
And Raphael agrees to explain. After the fall
That's
of
why
Satan
Timothy
and
says
the other
some of these
rebellious
folks running
angels,
around with
God
a
wished to
form
fill
of
these
godly
absent
devotion,
places.
but
And so
proving
he
false to
found
his
an empty
power.
part of the universe devoid of life and created the earth. If mankind showed obedience and belief in God's will, then there would be a day when the earth and heaven become one. This rather long discussion ends with Raphael returning to heaven.
All right, I'm not enduring another commercial from this, and I'm about to. I think we've done this long enough. I can continue this on another day if you guys want, but I just like my overall take from Paradise Lost is this is Satan's perspective post being kicked out of heaven. How they are regrouping, strategizing. Are they going to take the road of repentance? This was a conversation between some of those fallen angels, but then other fallen angels were like, no, let's stay the course. Let's go out and corrupt God's precious, creation, which were the human beings, right? And that's exactly what the mission, it seems like, of these fallen angels, what it has been for all of these years. And essentially, Satan goes back after he has successfully corrupted Adam and Eve, right? And he basically goes back and reports that, I was successful in planting the seeds of corruption among humanity, and now chaos can run freely. And so, very interesting take. I always give writers their props for going outside of the box and writing a perspective that nobody would think of. And again, I feel like the God has his prophets, the devil has his prophets, man, and so does the devil and his fallen angels. So I think John Milton was probably inspired by the devil, right, to give us Satan's side of the story, because again, we live in an age where humanizing wicked people and wicked things is like the thing to do, right? They do a good job at trying to humanize evil people, right? Pedophile type of people, and they'll try to humanize these folks. But let me get into the chat here for a little bit, and then I'm going to jump off. All praises to the God in heaven, Yahuwah, and the King Yahusha. If you guys are, if you don't have any faith or you don't believe this, will probably be over your head, right? You can keep it moving, right? But if you're somebody with faith, right, and you're just like, hey, I don't like, again, there's some people I know, they're like, I don't read anything but the Bible. Don't read anything but the Bible. You're Satan, the devil is going to confuse you if you read anything but the Bible. And it's just like, I know God's word. I know his perspective, right? But there's a lot of literature out there, right? And in order for me to really understand how to operate in Satan's world, I got to know how Satan is operating. And a lot of times the devil is in the details of a lot of things. Things that we don't even think about, he's in the details of. The devil is in these details, right? And so when I read things like Dante's Inferno, I don't read that as, oh, Dante being very creative and wanting to talk about the journeys through hell. No, I look at that as Dante being inspired to write his own little book of Enoch, right? Because the Divine Comedy got 3 books, right? Book of Enoch got 3 books, right? So I look at these humans, some of them, as being inspired to mock biblical texts, biblical prophets, in the service of the devil. So Nostradamus, for example, is one of Satan's prophets, right? And so on and so forth. These people are not inspired by God, right? But on the flip side, you have some guys like Charles Taze Russell, right? He was associated with the Freemasons, but at the same time, I personally believe that Charles Taze Russell was actually strategically used during the time of 1914. Because again, we're talking about the rise of the second beast, America, right? During that time, again, and if you guys wonder why I say the rise of the second beast, America, because after 1914, America rose as the global world power after we punked the Brits and devalued their sterling with our little crafty financial schemes, right? We took out the first beast in the Revelation, which were the remnants of those Anglo-Saxon dual world powers who were fragments of Rome, right? We took them out the game, right? And so now we live in the belly of the beast. If you are an American, And I was talking about on my live stream earlier how I think that the Statue of Liberty is actually a personification of Satan, the devil. I don't think that's a woman. I don't care about the background story or who inspired that. If you look at the Statue of Liberty and you look at those Mithra pictures, Constantine, that she even looks like depictions of Constantine as a woman. You know, that looks like a transgender woman to me. And the more I look at the Statue of Liberty, the more I don't really look at it as a beacon of liberty at all. I look at it as a harlot, a lighthouse to Babylon. That's what she is. She's a lighthouse to Babylon, aka America. But anyways, you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thanks for tuning in. I talk about everything on my channel, right? And I try to add a little humor and cynicism so everything's not so FBI, you know. But, you know, if you guys dig open conversations like this, definitely subscribe. If you like to broaden your horizons, I'm almost afraid to say enlighten these days because I feel like that's just such a, you know, this is what Satan does. He seeks to enlighten us with a bag of garbage, right? To confuse us from really just the real important things. I have a live stream that I did a couple of months ago called The Journey Through the Bible. If you are a beginner to biblical studies and you're trying to figure out like, what does this whole book really mean? What is the essence of the story? What should I be taking out? Somebody mentioned, why would God isolate one nation? Right. So I kind of go into, you know, how the nation of Israel kind of was conceived and why it was necessary for them and how they epically had a mission that they failed. Right. And if you really understand the Bible, right, you know, you'll understand that, you know, from an Old Testament standpoint, right? I know that some people, like, you know, Jewish people, they stop at Deuteronomy. That is their Torah, right? I can't tell anybody what to do, but those of you who examine the entire ancient text, right, beyond Deuteronomy, you're going to know what happened to those ancient Israelites. You're going to know that they fell out of covenant. You're going to know that as opposed to them being an example to the other nations, that they actually were trying to be like the other nations, down to worshiping their gods that engaged in child sacrifice. So when you're talking about the Assyrians subduing the northern kingdom of Israel, those were their judgments. It was deserved. We're talking about the Babylonians taking out the southern kingdom of Judah. Those were their judgments. It was prophesied. It was deserved. And so there's a lot of judgments and prophecies that are still in the brew. And again, it's up to us to understand them, right? So I encourage everybody to open up your Bible, right? Get into that Daniel's prophecy of anything, right? Because that's going to really help you to understand the timeline of mankind and why we are the feet of mixed with iron and clay. Therefore, we are the judgment generations. I actually expect to see judgment in my lifetime. I actually have visions of it more and more these days. So I expect to see Judgment Day in my lifetime. I am not afraid of Judgment Day. I'm actually really excited about it if I can see the pedophiles burn. Like, I'm like, please don't rapture me. Do not rapture me. I don't want to be like, take all the other people because they can't probably take it, right? But I want to be there, right? To see pedophiles burning. That's like my Judgment Day dream. Bucket list. Anyways, you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day. And I will catch you on the next one. Keep your prayers up. Keep your prayers up, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. If you would not disrespect or abuse yourself, do not disrespect or abuse your neighbor. Bye.